Hi, this is Brian Noyes, and welcome to this course on WPF data binding in depth. In this course, you'll get a good, deep, end-to-end coverage of the data binding capabilities in WPF, enabling you to build rich, data-driven business applications. You'll see how data binding can really transform the way you go about building out your user interface, populating it with data, and rendering out the visual elements that the user sees on the screen. We'll start out the course with the data binding overview. We'll cover the fundamentals of data binding to make sure everyone has a good level set, even if you have been exposed before, of what the basic building blocks with data binding are. Now, this course does not attempt to teach you everything you need to know about building XAML applications. I would strongly recommend you check out one of the other courses in the Pluralsight library, specifically the XAML Fundamentals course by Kevin Docks. The focus in this course is just going to be on everything to do about data binding. So after we go through the fundamentals, then we'll also talk about data sources, specifically what kinds of data objects you can use for data binding and what kinds of support those objects need to have to participate properly with the data binding mechanisms. We'll look at things at an entity level. We'll talk about datasets, XML, and collections that you'll work with. Next, we'll get into the core concepts of the bindings themselves. We'll talk about how you can provide alternate source objects other than the data context that we've talked about up to that point. We'll talk about the path property and how that indicates what part of the data-bound object to use to come up with a value. And we'll talk about the direction of flow of data through a binding. In the next module, we'll dive to a deeper level on bindings, and we'll go through a whole bunch of additional properties that bindings have for advanced scenarios. Probably won't use all of these on a regular basis, but you'll want to know they're there and how they work when the situation comes up to use them. This includes things like being able to do asynchronous bindings, changing when the data flows in two-way data binding scenarios, having fallback values and formatted values, and things like that. In the fifth module, we'll go into data templates. Data templates are one of the most powerful mechanisms in data binding that allow you to provide a custom visual representation for the data-bound objects you're working with, and these get rendered out by WPF itself. So we'll see how to define data templates and how to tie them in with your bindings. Next, we'll get into design time data binding, and you'll see that there's some wonderful features in Visual Studio for being able to drag and drop and generate user interface elements based on the data objects that you're working with, and in the process, getting the data bindings hooked up to the appropriate properties on those user interface elements. You'll also see how to work with design time data, sample data, that can be rendered in the design time environment to help you get your user interface laid out correctly. In the next module, we'll drill under the covers a little bit and let you see what's going on with the dynamic generation of controls in containers based on data binding. We'll also review the collection controls, such as list boxes, combo boxes, tab controls, and data grids, and cover all the important properties and usage of those in data-bound scenarios. Finally, we'll finish off the course with validation. Anytime you input data and start editing data, you need to make sure you're getting good data into the system. Bindings in WPF directly support evaluating validation and providing error indications to the user when input values are invalid. So we'll see how all that works, what the options are, and how to get it tied in with your bindings. So that's the game plan. Let's dive right in and start getting you up and running with data binding.